Well, how did the panel go?
We haven't done our panel yet.
Oh, I thought it was
No,
before this.
no, we're
after.
going down after.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm sure it'll be fine.
So
This is all fresh material. never first Iron Man interviews.
Are there any exclusives you're going to reveal at the panel? Or?
Oh, I don't know. It depends if my questions. I come from the kids' books world, so my questions are always usually very simple. So anything more than 5 or 6 syllables, I get stumped. And what I love about when you're talking to kids is, when you're asking for questions, they will say something that is in no way related to the topic. They'll be like, "My dad loves sports cars." I go, okay, technically not a question and not relevant, but it is very enjoyable.
And coming from that world, I guess the first most obvious starting point, what does it feel like, what does it mean for you to be part of this huge celebration here today at the XL?
This is my second time here. The last time I was here, I came with the Artemis Fowl graphic novel with Andrew Duncan, and I kind of got hooked on it. And since that time, I've been to several around the world. So it's nice to come back here. And I think I'm like most ordinary Joes, and I'm just walking around with my eyes and my mouth open, and I can't believe all the time people put in and all the passion they have. And then I deride myself for not being. Why can't I be that passionate? Look at these people who are having a great time, and I'm just walking around in a blue sports coat. So I'm disappointed, frankly, in myself, and I'm vowing now to change, and I'll be better in future.
That's awesome. Do you want to introduce us to the new book?
Yes, the new book is called Iron Man, The Gauntlet, and it tells the story of Tony Stark's visit to Dublin, Ireland. And I reasoned with Disney and Marvel, there's not much point in me writing a book if I don't add Irish qualities to it. So, and also there was a building I didn't like in Dublin. I thought it would be very therapeutic to blow that up, even in a book.
Which building?
It is the convention centre, which I'm not very fond of, but it's fine. I think they're okay. I also blew up a bridge which I really liked, the Samuel Beckett Bridge, because I thought it would look good in flames, which is probably not the healthiest feeling to have running around your brain. So I released it into the book, and so in the story, it's a pretty standard setup. Tony's appearing at an eco conference. He's going to be the guest speaker, but he gets literally hijacked along the way by his own artificial intelligence. I don't want to say any more because there's some twists in it, but I tried to put stuff in there for the people of my age who were Marvel fans back in the 70s. So I know maybe a few mums and dads will have a read of their kids' books, and I would like to think that there's a couple of one-liners and a couple of in-jokes in there for them. It's like the Simpson effect. Everybody can watch The Simpsons and everyone gets something different out of it. So I tried to include that in this one.
Does it exist in its own kind of continuity bubble?
That's exactly right, because otherwise I would have had to read every comic, and I didn't have time. So what I decided to do to sidestep all the rules and regulations that Marvel rightly have to keep their universe consistent was to take him a weekend away. So he's away in Dublin for 2 days, and then after that, if he survives, you could probably guess that he does, but he just goes back. So there's nothing. He doesn't have to call S.H.I.E.L.D. He doesn't have to call Steve Rogers. There's no ramifications. It's like a standalone James Bond Iron Man adventure. So he's off, does the business, comes home, and that made my life very easy, and it also meant I had to do no research, as I live in Dublin.
And how did it come about? How did the whole project start?
It was very straightforward. I am published by Disney in America. Disney bought Marvel. They had the idea they would get some of their better-known writers to do an Avengers character. And they came to me and said, would you do Captain America and Iron Man? And I said, well, I don't really have an idea for Captain America, but I have a really good idea for Iron Man. And also I figured it's harder to take 2 people out of a universe for a weekend. But if you take one character and then all the other characters are new, you can do that. So I said I would do Iron Man. As soon as they said it to me, I could feel my heart kind of speeding up, because I would say Iron Man would be my favorite of the superheroes from my youth. And I spent many long hours drawing the various suits, from the very beginning when it was more or less a barrel, right up to the multi-plated armor of the early 80s. I spent a lot of time doing that. I never got good at it, but I certainly enjoyed it.
Of all the wonderful characters that Marvel have given us, why was it Iron Man for you that always compelled you the most?
I think with Iron Man, Marvel were kind of prescient in that they anticipated the rock and roll scientist, which did not exist at that time. And they saw a time where a guy who was a scientist and an inventor could be a superstar. And that has come to pass. I mean, Elon Musk is just one of the guys who attracts tens of thousands of people. Every time Apple do a new event, it's just rammed with screaming fans. And I think that is very interesting. And in other books I had done, for example, I did a book about hitchhikers, and I had Thor in it, and he was like a media personality. He was really upset when his views went down or his likes. And I always liked that idea that the cult of personality is so huge now that no matter what area you're in, you can be a superstar in that area. And I got a taste of that recently. I was on the road with Oliver Jeffers. We did a book together. And Oliver would be one of the top illustrators in the world at the moment. But if you're not in that world, if you don't have 4-year-old kids, you don't know. You probably have not heard of Oliver Jeffers. But if you do, like there were people coming in just weeping, at Oliver. This was the guy who drew the Penguin, And I saw that he was a massive star in that arena. And then as soon as we stepped out of the bookstore, we were back to being ourselves again. No one knew who we were. So I like that idea that he is trying to lead almost a triple life, in that he's Tony Stark, the brash, playboy around town. He's Tony Stark, the superhero, but he's also Tony Stark, the scientist. And that is a lot of personality balls to keep in the air. And there is a fourth one, of course. He's tortured by his own family past. So it's a really complex character. And I think Marvel in the 70s really got into those characters in the way that other comics didn't. In other comics, you were just a superhero, and that's what you did. But the Marvel characters, Spider-Man was another example. Like poor old Spider-Man had a really hard time in school with his girlfriend. His Aunt May wouldn't let him go out and be Spider-Man. I really loved that because you felt a little bit you could identify with him. And with Tony Stark now, on a tiny scale, I've juggled lives as well. Most of the time I'm in a little room on my own, and then for 2 months of the year I have loads of cameras pointed at me, and it's really weird. People think, well, you do this all the time. I don't. Mostly I'm sitting in front of my computer listening to Kate Bush or Pink Floyd, and writing words that I hope people will want to read. So that kind of duality of the personality and lifestyle I found interesting, and I think that you can really play with that with Tony Stark.
It's interesting you link yourself to Tony in the book as yourself. Like from a real world point of view, you mentioned Elon, but is there anyone else you think is very much like a Tony Stark in the real world?
I think Steve Jobs was. He had the hubris, he was, when he walked on, it was like, yes, I deserve this. Yes, you're right to applaud more. I'm going to wait. And Tony Stark has that as well. But that is always a cover for something else. I mean, I think if you exhibit behavior like that, it's really that need to be loved by everybody. That's actually a bit of a weakness, And I think Tony has that in spades. He knows he has it, and he's trying to. And there's some funny passages where he's created kind of a fake Tony, the proto-Tony, who learns his behavior from soundbites of the real Tony on the internet. So every reply he gives, Tony Stark has said that thing. And Tony starts to read, oh my God, I'm a bit of an asshole. Did I say that? He's kind of he starts to realize that maybe he's not as cool as he thought he was. Maybe he's a bit of a loudmouth, and maybe he should tone it back a bit. And I think I like that self-realization as well, because a lot of the time, people don't have self-awareness. Most of us don't. So it was a nice way for Tony to actually meet himself, which was interesting.
And have you taken some of that inspiration from people like Steve Jobs and fed that into Tony?
I think, Steve Jobs, and also from the Iron Man movies. There's no direct connection between the movie. I wanted to have this book directly set after the Avengers, the second, or which one? Which one was when the city went up in the air? The second one.
Age of Ultron.
Age of Ultron. Sorry, guys, I'm in the right room to ask that question. So I wanted, literally, on his way home from there. But they said, no, you can't. There can't be any crossover between the books. That was the one thing Marvel insisted, no crossover between the books and the movies. And I said, fine. So what was the question?
I just wondered, have you looked at people like Steve Jobs and immediately gone,
Richard Branson, like Donald Trump a little bit. All these guys
who... Donald Trump?
Well, it's just that kind of huge ego that people have, that they feel just by being here, I should be applauded. And that's a very American thing. You don't get that in Ireland, or you don't get it in the UK. You don't do an event in the UK and people stand up and applaud when you come on. They wait, they say, okay, I live 10 miles away from here, you better be funny. And the first 15 minutes is like getting people to just unfold their arms. Whereas if I do an event in the States and I walk in, sometimes people are on their feet straight away. And I love the idea that Tony Stark would come to Ireland expecting that adulation, which is fantastic, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love it. I've been nearly killed by adoring fans. It's amazing. So, but Tony Stark lands, and in America, you would just have hordes of people running over applauding Tony Stark. But in Ireland, it's like, who's this guy? I'm trying to watch EastEnders. He's making all this racket. He's interfering with my telephone reception. So we have a different outlook on things. We're more curmudgeonly in Ireland, and I suspect in the UK also, we're a little bit more reserved in our reaction to things. And I think if you dropped an American superstar into that environment, it's an interesting dynamic. The best insult I ever got, and I've gotten quite a few having brothers, is one that means nothing, but I couldn't answer it. I was walking down the street in Wexford town, where I'm from, and I had just got the news that my first one of the Artemis Fowl books was #1 in the New York Times. So I was like feeling quite cocky, which is always bad. And there was this young guy leaning up against the wall, and he just said, "Would you look at him and his books?" And that doesn't mean anything at all. But I was devastated. I was like, oh, I had no comeback, and he just like shook his head and walked off in disgust. So I love that the idea that the Inspector Conroy in this book gives Tony a really hard time, and has no respect for him at all. He's just an annoyance. Trump had built a golf course in Ireland, and he caused a lot of trouble. But he just thought the locals would fall on his feet. But he tried to build a wall, actually, but he got turned down. That's irony, I suppose. But we tend to have a different attitude towards celebrity, and I think you guys do also. Over here, and just off the European mainland, we're a little more reserved. I mean, I think if Paul McCartney came in here now, you guys probably go, right, Paul?
Yes.
And that would more or less be it, And if he wanted a chat, he could have a chat, but no one would be running over and annoying him. And that's what happens with Bono in Ireland. People don't harass him in a restaurant. They just kind of go.
You're going to have to ask before the interview, runs out. So we're going to ask how much of what we've read on the internet about the Artemis Fowl film is true.
Well, I'll tell you exactly where it's at now. It's been directed by Kenneth Branagh. That is true. It was written by Conor McPherson, the famous Irish playwright. That is true. They're in the design phase now. Kenneth is doing another movie at the moment, which is a Poirot movie, Murder on the Orient Express. And he plays Poirot, and then the next movie he's doing is Artemis. Now that's the current state, but I have been here 3 or 4 times before with other directors, so I've decided not to stay too in touch this time, because I trust the players. So I'm just saying, you guys go, I'll come to the premiere. But they've been very kind, and they're saying we won't do anything you don't like, and if you ever want to come in and do anything, that's great.
What wouldn't you like?
Well, I remember at one stage there was a script which luckily never got made, where do you remember the Scary Movie franchise? That was kind of, they took all the scary stuff and they kind of pastiched it and threw it in one movie. So they decided they were going to make Artemis Fowl like that. So like Gollum would walk in the middle, and I said, what? But and that ended up getting made as fantasy movie, or I forget what it was called. Do you remember that one? It was like
epic movie, I think.
Something like. Yeah. But that was originally an Artemis Fowl script, and I don't know how it would have worked. I can't understand it.
No.
But I was like, can you imagine how horrified I was when they started pitching this to me? I literally felt sick. And they're going, no. And then Aslan comes out. I said, stop talking. You can cut that, can you?
Yeah.
I was so angry. And I was at a meeting. This is how bad it gets. And we were sitting around in Los Angeles. And there was a guy who was going to direct it there. Initially, first guy. Lovely guy. And he said, okay, we need to establish some ground rules. He said, what is it in Violet? He said, I think it's about an Irish boy called Artemis Fowl. He's 12. It's a heist, or it's a hostage movie. It's set in a mansion in Dublin, Ireland. And one of the Hollywood guys said, I'm not kidding. He said, okay, could it be in space? And I knew we were screwed. I said, this movie's done. With that guy in the room, this was like, I said, with this guy in the room, this is never going to happen. And I was right. He destroyed the whole set of meetings by just asking stupid questions all the time. Can he fall in love with the elf? I say, first of all, they're not the same species, you freak. Secondly, she's only 2 feet high. What kind of mind? Get out, I've got kids, get out of my sight. So you're kind of up against that. But this time, it's Conor McPherson and Kenneth Branagh. They don't play around like that. These are serious. Like, Kenneth is a serious writer, serious actor, serious director. Like, you're not dealing with that level of stuff anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping this team goes ahead. It would be great for me and for the story, I think.
And what do you think about like the focus on blockbusters? Like, Comic-Con is a huge blockbuster event now, but like, does literature get lost in that? Like, that's obviously...
Well, literature is a small part of that, but it's not, not everything is about books, and this is not about books. It's about comic books, which are books, I suppose. I was a primary teacher, and a lot of my colleagues would say, well, books, they're, comic books, that's not literature. And I would say, no, it's literature and art. It's fantastic, and I would bring in comic books to the kids, and but it's a different thing. If you go to a library, you're not going to have people dressed up as Iron Man. It's this is for lovers of sci-fi fantasy, and I am one of those people. I was just hoping Christopher Lambert would be here, then that would be my dream come true, but I don't think he's here this year. But so I think we're in the right place for what we want today, and a small part of that would be character novels, great, but the big part of it is movies, games, and comics, and that's as it should be.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Can you cut my swearing out there?
No,
I didn't even expect to swear. It's like random.
It's what happened.
Yeah. When you talk about movie people, that all comes out.
Yeah.